One final shot, one returning force, one debut dream, and one nation back after half a century away. This is Group K of the World Cup 2026. Welcome back to the channel, and this is our Group K preview, one of the most fascinating groups in the tournament, and we're starting with the favourites, Portugal. Portugal arrive at the 2026 World Cup as one of those nations that always feels close to something big. The talent has rarely been in doubt, the quality's never really gone away, but when you look at their World Cup story, there is still a sense of unfinished business. Their great breakthrough came in 1966 when Eusebio inspired Portugal to the semi-finals in one of the most iconic individual tournament performances the game has seen. But after that, they largely disappeared from the World Cup stage, making just one appearance between then and the end of the 20th century. Since 2002 though, Portugal have become regulars. They've qualified for every single World Cup this century, and in that time they've established themselves as one of the Europe's modern powers. They won the European Championships in 2016, they won the Nations League in 2019, they won it again in 2025, but the World Cup, there's still a gap between their reputation and their return. They reached the semi-finals in 2006 with a young Cristiano Ronaldo announcing himself on the biggest stage. In 2022 they once again looked dangerous, only to fall in the quarter-finals to Morocco. And for a nation that has produced so many elite players, not just one golden generation but several, that record feels slightly underwhelming. Now in 2026, Portugal arrive with a squad strong enough to dream and with one storyline impossible to ignore. This is almost certainly Cristiano Ronaldo's final World Cup. The last chance to add the one prize missing from a career that has already touched almost everything else. Portugal's route to the tournament was not completely flawless, but it was never truly in danger either. They had a major shock in Dublin with a defeat to the Republic of Ireland in November, which raised some eyebrows and forced the team to respond. Portugal did exactly that. The answer was emphatic. A 9-1 demolition of Armenia sealed qualification in style, reminding everybody of the attacking quality within the squad. When Portugal click, they can overwhelm teams very quickly. The broader picture though of their recent form is equally interesting. Euro 2024 was deeply disappointing. It left real doubts around Roberto Martínez, his decision making, and whether this hugely talented squad was being used to its full potential. But the response since then has been impressive. Nations League triumph again in 2025 changed the mood entirely. Wins over Germany and Spain showed not only technical quality but maturity and adaptability too. This no longer feels like a Portugal side that has to dominate possession to dominate a match. They can control the ball when needed, but they're increasingly comfortable playing without it, staying compact and striking in the big moments. They arrive here in a strong place, qualified without real alarm, battle tested and coming off a trophy that has restored both confidence and credibility. Leading Portugal into the 2026 World Cup is Roberto Martínez. He remains one of football's more intriguing international managers and has always been articulate, always persuasive and able to present a clear footballing vision. Across an eclectic career, he won the FA Cup with Wigan Athletic, took Everton to a 5th place Premier League finish, and he's led Belgium to a World Cup semi-final while spending years at the top end of the FIFA rankings. With Portugal, his spells had extremes, a poor European Championship, but a Nations League title, bringing belief back. Tactically, Portugal are built around flexibility. Martínez does not want this team locked into one shape or one rhythm. They can operate in a 4-3-3, 4-2-3-1, or even a 3-4-2-1, depending on the opponent and the game state. Portugal want technical security in midfield, attacking quality between the lines, and fullbacks who can turn possession into pressure. Nuno Mendes is central to that, one of the best attack-minding fullbacks in the world, capable of stretching the pitch and driving the team forward. In midfield, Bruno Fernandes and Bernardo Silva give Portugal the ability to slow games down or speed them up with tremendous creativity, while players like Vitinha bring control and intelligence in deeper areas. This team are especially dangerous. They're not one-dimensional. They can dominate the ball, but they have pragmatic game plans. Against elite opposition in the Nations League, they had less possession, but they found ways to win. This suggests a team is growing tactically rather than just simply relying on their talent. There is, though, a Martínez trait that seems impossible to ignore. He likes a surprise, something experimental, an unusual selection, something left field. Sometimes it works, sometimes it can be overthinking. In tournament football, though, that line can be very thin. Portugal's squad is filled with elite level quality. That is what makes them one of the most complete sides in this group. Bruno Fernandes remains absolutely central. He's not just a creator, he's a tempo setter, a player who decides when Portugal accelerate and when they hold. Around him, Bernardo Silva brings subtlety, intelligence and a constant ability to appear in useful spaces. Vitinha has become increasingly important as the player who can steady gains from deeper areas and give Portugal rhythm when matches threaten to become stretched. Out wide and from fullback, Nuno Mendes gives them thrust, pace and elite level quality in both directions. João Neves, still young but already trusted in major moments, represents the next generation within the squad and reflects how deep Portugal's talent pool now runs. The conversation though will always return to Cristiano Ronaldo. At 41, he remains the defining figure in Portuguese football. He's still scoring, still central to the story, still the player opponents instinctively look for first. His numbers in qualification were excellent, and now even though his presence changes how matches feel, it's also where the tension lies. In the latter stage of his career, questions have grown louder about whether his influence can still translate into decisive moments against top opponents in major tournaments. That will be one of the defining themes of Portugal's World Cup, as it looks like Ronaldo's last. And emotionally, there's another layer too. Diogo Jota's memory will be with this squad throughout the tournament. His passing left a deep mark on Portugal's players, staff and supporters. Wonderful touch from them as well, including him in the squad list. And sometimes that kind of emotional weight can either burden a squad or drive it. For Portugal, the blend's there. They've got experience, talent, depth and flexibility. It's whether this tournament, where their quality finally truly matches their potential. And this is where Group K becomes so interesting, because Portugal may be the favourites, but the next team in this group arrive with an entirely different kind of threat, one built not on reputation, but on resilience, adaptability, and a story 52 years in the making. The Democratic Republic of Congo arrive at the 2026 World Cup carrying one of the most powerful stories in the competition. This will be only their second appearance at a World Cup and their first since 1974, when the country competed under the name Zaire. That campaign remains one of the most remembered in World Cup history, but largely for the wrong reasons. They lost all three group matches, conceded heavily, and became an easy symbol of just how unforgiving the highest level of international football can be. The enduring image is still Mwepu Alunga breaking from the defensive wall, booting away a Brazil free kick before it had been taken, one of those moments you just won't forget in the tournament folklore. But this return's not about reliving the past, it's about rewriting it. For more than half a century, DR Congo have waited to come back. They've had talented players, emotional moments, near misses and frustrations, but now finally they return with the chance to create a completely different kind of memory. This is a nation with football passion, athletic quality, and increasingly a wider pool of talent to draw from. In 2026, they step back onto the biggest stage with the opportunity to show how far they have come. Their route to the World Cup was anything but simple. DR Congo finished second in their group during the first stage of African qualifying. That alone tells you something important about them. They were good enough to stay alive, but not dominant enough to make the job easy. A costly home defeat to Senegal denied them automatic progression and forced them into the long route. From there, the pressure only increased. They advanced to a 4-team continental playoff tournament where the margins were tiny and the tension constant. They beat Cameroon, then they overcame Nigeria on penalties in circumstances that felt dramatic, even by the standards of African qualification. That earned them one final chance, a winner-takes-all clash with Jamaica, and they found a way. It wasn't a beautiful victory, not a glamorous performance, decided in extra time by a scrappy Axel Tuanzebe goal, but maybe that's the point. DR Congo did not qualify by blowing teams away, they qualified by surviving, adapting and staying strong when everything was on the line. That gives them a profile that could be dangerous in tournament football. They're used to tension and they're used to find answers in difficult moments and games where one moment can decide everything. Leading DR Congo into the tournament is Sébastien de Sabre. His managerial career has taken him almost everywhere. He's coached across France, Ivory Coast, Cameroon, Tunisia, Angola, Morocco, Algeria, Egypt and the Gulf, building the kind of career that rarely follows a straight line. But he's a manager with lots of experience. After a spell with Uganda, he took charge of DR Congo in 2022 with a clear brief: get them back to the World Cup. He has done exactly that. Under de Sabre, DR Congo has become a team defined less by ideology and more by how they adapt. They've not just got one grand footballing concept. They don't dominate possession. They don't panic if a game becomes messy. In fact, that might suit them. Tactically, more likely to operate in a flexible 4-2-3-1 or a 4-2-2, depending on who they're playing. But they're looking for balance. They play through midfield when space is available, but they're comfortable going more direct or turning matches into physical contests. This emphasis is often on resilience, shape and collective effort rather than stylised attacking plays. Out wide, they do have players capable of stretching the game, driving into space, and they've got good movement between the lines. Technical quality is there in midfield to keep the side functional rather than frantic, and defensively they do have some good experience. They're not the most glamorous team in the group, but they might be one of the most awkward to face. Cedric Bakambu remains central to the way that this team functions. By the time the tournament begins, he'll be 35, and while his club level goals have not always flowed in recent seasons, he's the attacking reference point for his country. He's the striker they turn to when they need presence, when they need movement in the channels, and when they need someone capable of turning half chances into something meaningful. Alongside him, Johan Visser gives them mobility and intelligence between the lines. Hasn't had the greatest of seasons at Newcastle, but he can drift along the lines. He can combine well with other attackers, and they'll hope they can get more from him. Out wide, Nathaniel Mbuku and Mashak Elliott bring speed and directness, the kind of players who can force games to become uncomfortable very quickly. In midfield, Noah Siddiqui is one of the standout names for the future. He brings energy, technical security and a growing sense he could become one of the key figures in this national team for years to come. He was exceptional for Sunderland this season as well in their return to the Premier League. There is also a bigger story behind this squad. A significant part of DR Congo's growth has come through the recruitment of talent from players developed in places like Belgium, England and France who have chosen to represent the nation, adding quality without seemingly damaging the unity. And the opposite appears true. It feels like a squad whose spirit has been strengthened rather than fractured by that process. That blend of background, styles and experience gives DR Congo a modern feel, and they're not just returning to the World Cup as a symbolic participant, they are arriving with players who can genuinely compete. The question for DR Congo is this: can resilience and adaptability turn them from underdogs into genuine disruptors in one of the tournament's most competitive groups? If DR Congo are built to survive chaos, the next team in Group K arrive trying to avoid it altogether. Structured, disciplined and making history simply by being here. Uzbekistan. Uzbekistan arrive at the 2026 World Cup as complete newcomers. That alone makes them one of the most interesting teams in the tournament, with this being their first ever World Cup appearance. For a football-mad nation of around 36 million people, that moment carries huge significance. Since gaining independence after the breakup of the Soviet Union, Uzbekistan has spent decades trying to break through. On more than one occasion, they came painfully close. They fell short for 2014 on goal difference, they missed out for 2018 by just 2 points, and then there was 2006, one of the strangest qualification stories in modern World Cup history, when a playoff against Bahrain had to be replayed after a penalty was incorrectly ruled out. This is not a nation that suddenly appeared, it's a nation that's been knocking on the door for years. That does give Uzbekistan a bit of a different profile from the other debutants. They're fresh-faced at this level, but they don't arrive without context. There's been sustained growth in their football infrastructure, there's more belief in their national team, and they do have a strong youth development beneath their senior side. In that sense, 2026 feels less like a lucky breakthrough and more like the point of where years of near misses have finally turned into something real. They qualified at the earliest possible opportunity in the third round of Asian qualifiers, which tells you how solid their campaign was. They didn't need late drama, there was no reliance on a fourth round rescue act or having an intercontinental uncertain playoff. They did the job early, they did it efficiently. They got the better of both United Arab Emirates and Qatar in their group, two sides with recent tournament pedigree and can expose weaknesses, but Uzbekistan handled that challenge well and they secured their place with authority. That matters because qualification in Asia can become difficult and complicated. Groups can be tough and it can be lost in one or two key moments. Uzbekistan avoided that. They were disciplined, consistent, and they made their way through with the stability that was required. The broader question is what the form translates to at World Cup level. Because qualifying well and competing well on the global stage are two very different things. Now, there's no pressure of being a major footballing power, but they arrive with the expectation from their own country that this should be the start of something bigger. They don't want this to be a one-off. They want this to be the moment that Uzbekistan established themselves as a nation capable of returning again and again. Leading Uzbekistan into the tournament is Fabio Cannavaro, one of the most recognisable names in the group and one of the more unusual managerial appointments heading into 2026. Cannavaro, of course, captained Italy to the World Cup in 2006 and remains one of the defining defenders of his generation. His managerial career, though, has been far less straightforward. He's had spells in China, Italy and Croatia with mixed results, and his reputation as a coach has never quite matched the stature of his playing career, which makes his appointment by the Uzbek FA even more notable. He only took over in October after qualification had already been secured under Timur Kapadze. That decision was controversial but also revealed something important about what Uzbekistan think they need at this World Cup. They're not looking to play expansive romantic football, but they're looking to be hard to beat, and Cannavaro has effectively been brought in to tighten the team up and make them even more defensively disciplined. Previous regimes had encouraged a more attack-minded football, but this version of Uzbekistan looks likely to be more conservative. Probably a compact block, protecting the central spaces, and they'll be willing to have long periods without the ball to give them a chance of staying in matches. This means they're likely to be one of the more cautious teams in the tournament, trying to reduce space, limit risk and make games ugly if necessary. They might not be the most exciting for neutrals, but for a debutant trying to stay alive in a difficult group, it makes complete sense. Now, the reality for Uzbekistan is most of their squad will be unfamiliar to a global audience. Large proportion of players are based domestically, which means they don't really have the international profile of some of the other team in the group. That doesn't mean there's no quality here. Kusanov is probably the most widely recognised name, a defender whose rise has been rapid and whose exposure at the top level with Manchester City gives Uzbekistan an important point of credibility at the back. He represents the kind of player this nation hopes to produce more consistently in the years ahead. Eldor Shomurodov remains the key figure in attack. He's experienced, hard-working, leads the line and gives Uzbekistan a focal point. He might not get a flood of chances in this group, but when they do create moments, his finishing and intelligence in the box could be critical. Abospek Fazuliev is another player to watch, smaller in stature, but he's sharp in his movements and creative thinking. He's somebody a bit more less predictable in a team that may otherwise be heavily structured. He could be key in tight matches because he's often the one looking to find the unexpected pass or drawing a foul in a dangerous area. There is also a wider sense that this team is a visible part of a bigger development story. Uzbekistan's youth sides have shown genuine promise in recent years, and results at different age group levels suggest the country believes this World Cup debut should not be an isolated moment. But the question for them is, can their defensive discipline and tournament caution turn a debut campaign into something more than just a historic appearance? And that leaves the final team in Group K, a nation with flair, identity and one of the most recognisable football personalities in the tournament, Colombia. Colombia arrive at the 2026 World Cup with a football identity that's always made them compelling. They're one of those nations neutrals naturally gravitate towards. Across different generations, Colombia have brought style, emotion, creativity and players feeling larger than life. From René Higuita, Carlos Valderrama to Freddy Rincon, from Radamel Falcao to James Rodríguez. They have long produced football that feels expressive rather than mechanical. Their modern World Cup high point came in 2014. The tournament turned James Rodríguez into a global star, saw Colombia reach the quarter-finals for the first time and left behind one of the defining individual campaigns of the competition. They missed out though in 2022, which made that sense of lost momentum feel even sharper. Now they return in 2026 with a squad that still carries talent, still carries flair and still carries the hope that this generation can produce another memorable run. There is also a deeper emotional layer to their World Cup history. The 1994 tournament in the United States remains one of the darkest and most painful episodes associated with football. And any return to a World Cup hosted in North America inevitably brings some of those memories into focus. But that does not define this team, but it is part of the wider story. In 2026, they come back with hope rather than fear, and with the sense this may be the final World Cup chapter for James, the player who's come to symbolise the modern national team. Now, Colombia's path back to the World Cup had quality, it was turbulent, but ultimately relief. At their best, they looked exceptional. They beat both Brazil and Argentina at home, underlining the level the team can reach. A 4-0 demolition of Chile showed how dangerous they became when rhythm and confidence aligned. But for stretches of qualifying, they looked like one of South America's most dangerous sides. But it wasn't entirely smooth. By March, a run of 3 consecutive defeats had created real anxiety and reopened memories of the collapse that cost them a place in 2022. That's always the danger in CONMEBOL qualifying. One poor run can change everything and momentum can change quickly. To Colombia's credit, they recovered. They steadied themselves, avoided disaster and finished third in the qualifying table. That final position probably reflects them quite well. Not flawless, not dominant throughout, but absolutely strong enough to belong at the World Cup. They do also arrive with the confidence of having reached the Copa America final in 2024. That run reinforced the sense that under Néstor Lorenzo, this team is not just talented, but they're increasingly coherent. There's structure now to go with the flair. Lorenzo will lead Colombia into his first World Cup finals with a significant expectation on his shoulders. A former Argentina defender who played in the 1990 World Cup, Lorenzo has built his reputation steadily and he's become a popular figure with Colombian supporters. That popularity was strengthened by the run to the Copa America final, although it was later tested during a difficult stretch in qualification when results dipped and pressure rose. What Lorenzo has done well is preserve Colombia's traditional flair while adding more balance. Tactically, they usually line up in a 4-2-3-1, a structure that gives them a stable base, but they have plenty of freedom for their more creative players. Fullbacks like to advance, midfielders rotate around the ball, and in attack, Colombia can either dominate possession or they step into a mid-block and break quickly depending on the opponent. That flexibility is going to be key. This isn't just a front foot possession team. They can control games. They're very dangerous in transition, especially when space opens for Diaz. The midfield triangle around James Rodríguez, Richard Diaz and João Arias give them both technical security and the ability to play through pressure. The main unresolved issue is the number 9 role. Colombia do have multiple attacking threats, but who takes ownership of the central striker position could have a major impact how far they go. Tournament football, that focal point can often be the difference between promise and end product. Diaz is the player who most clearly defines this Colombia side at this point. He's explosive, direct, capable of deciding games through sheer individual quality, as seen previously with Liverpool and now with Bayern Munich. In qualifying, he was decisive, scoring important goals, producing moments that changed matches against elite opposition, and he enters this tournament in his prime, and if Colombia are to go deep, he will almost certainly be central to it. James Rodríguez is the emotional heart of the side, the captain, the symbol, the player most closely associated with Colombia's modern World Cup identity. He might no longer be the explosive force of 2014, but his intelligence, quality on the ball and ability to shape moments still matter enormously. If this is his final World Cup, Colombia will want it to be a meaningful one. Around them, there is real support. João Arias gives energy and movement, Richard Diaz adds power and control in midfield, while Juan Fernando Quintero remains the fan favourite, a classic number 10, capable of transforming the mood of an attack the moment he steps on the pitch. Even if he's not always a starter, he gives Colombia something very few international teams still possess, genuine street football unpredictability. This is a team with creators, dribbling and capable of lifting a stadium. The challenge is turning that talent into sustained tournament level consistency. And can they manage the flair, the balance and attacking quality to finally come together at the right moment to make them one of the World Cup's most dangerous teams? And that is what makes Group K so compelling. 4 teams with completely different footballing identities, 4 very different versions of pressure. Portugal carry expectation and the emotional weight of Ronaldo's final World Cup. Colombia bring flair, creativity and the feeling they could either soar or wobble. Congo return with resilience, momentum and the belief that they're not just here to make up the numbers. And Uzbekistan arrive with the freedom and caution of a debutant trying to turn discipline into history. This group's not about who has the best players, it's about who can impose their kind of game. The group begins with Portugal against the Democratic Republic of Congo in Houston, and it is an immediate intriguing opener. Portugal want to establish control, settle into the tournament and show why they're favourites. But Congo are the kind of team that can make a match uncomfortable quickly. Physical, adaptable, and they'll be unafraid of games that become messy. If Portugal don't start this one cleanly, the opening match could be more awkward than they're expecting. Uzbekistan against Colombia, played at the Estadio Azteca in Mexico City, feels like a very different kind of test. For Uzbekistan, a first World Cup match in one of the most iconic stadiums in football. For Colombia, the challenge of breaking down a compact and disciplined side without losing patience. Colombia score early, the match could open up. If they don't, Uzbekistan will want to kind of keep that tight, keep it tense, and a low margin contest that will suit them. Portugal against Uzbekistan on match day 2 has the feel of a game where pressure could build on both sides. Portugal likely to dominate territory and possession, and again Uzbekistan will be looking to make things narrow, make the game slow and frustrating. The longer it stays level, the more interesting it becomes, but it's a sort of match where one moment of brilliance or one mistake will change everything. Colombia against Congo in Zapopan could be one of the most important games in the group. Colombia may go into it as favourites. This is not a simple stylistic matchup. Their athleticism and their transitional threat could make them difficult to contain, but Colombia will try to use their technical quality and movement between the lines to open the game up. It does feel like a fixture which will have major implications as to who qualifies. And then there's the final day meeting between Colombia and Portugal in Miami. On paper, it's the glamour fixture of the group. Depending on results, it could decide first place, qualification, or even force one of the favourites into a tense final night scenario. Colombia's flair against Portugal's flexibility, Diaz against Mendes, James against Bruno, perhaps one more major World Cup chapter for Ronaldo. It could define the entire identity of Group K. While Congo will take on Uzbekistan at the same time, it will be interesting what's at stake for either of those teams. It could be absolutely momentous and an opportunity to find their way into the next phase of the tournament. Group K feels like a group where the quality at the top should eventually tell, but not without difficulty. Portugal have the deepest squad, the greatest tactical flexibility and the highest ceiling in the section, but Colombia have enough attacking talent and tournament pedigree to follow them through, especially if Diaz and James can set the tone in difficult moments. Congo look like the side most capable of disturbing that order, but Uzbekistan may prove far more awkward than many expect, simply because of how disciplined they're likely to be. Let me know your predictions in the comments. I'll see you for the next group preview. Ciao for now.